Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Sorry we are exactly 2 minutes late. I am Lindsay, and I'm here to introduce Erika Flora and go over the agenda with you really quickly before we get started today. So here we are, our agenda. What is ITIL Practitioner is where we're going to be starting today. We're going to go over what the book says, the actual text from Axelos, and we're going to go over the exam and how that all shakes out. Is it more like foundations? Is it more like intermediate? Is it anything like anything ITIL's ever put out? And then we're going to go over some helpful tips and tricks that'll get you through that exam and help you make the most out of this new certification. Your lovely speaker today is Erika Flora. She's a principal at Beyond 20. She is my boss. She is wonderful. She's an ITIL expert, PMP, PGMP, CSN, CSPO, and CSP. Those are many letters, and they're all very important. She's also a foodie, a lifelong learner, and a lover of independent films. So without further ado, Erika, tell us a little bit about Beyond 20 and then tell us a little bit about ITIL Practitioner.
Great. Okay, so for those of you that don't know me, my name is Erika Flora. That was a picture of me on the previous slide. I'm one of the principals and senior advisors at Beyond 20. I've been a long-time ITIL consultant and people wrangler. I'm ITIL expert certified, and back in my day, when I got certified, it was version 2 of the ITIL books, and at the time it was a 6-hour written essay, so that was super fun. I have a bunch of other certifications, as you guys saw behind my name. I'm super passionate about best practice and learning about cutting-edge ideas, methods, so we can more intelligently help our customers, help our organizations get better. So yeah, let's talk about Beyond 20. So the name Beyond 20 actually comes from a Gartner research study where they looked at the root cause of when mission-critical systems within their organizations failed. And what they found was fascinating. Turns out that software, hardware, natural disasters only account for about 20% of mission-critical failures. This sounds kind of counterintuitive, but some of you will probably be shaking your heads when I say this, or nodding your heads rather when I say this, that people and process, however, accounted for a whopping 80% of mission-critical failures. And in fact, I think the last time we did this webinar, it was the Delta story about their downtime was a really big deal, and turns out, yeah, it was a people and a process failure that took place, and that's what we're passionate about, fixing the people and the process stuff. We do that through training, like ITIL training, and we'll talk about, there's a certification for practitioner, we'll talk about what that looks like, but we also help design processes, build service catalogs, implement software. We're a registered educational provider with PMI, so any PMPs that are on the call, you guys get 1 PDU for attending, and like Lindsay said earlier, we'll send out information so you can get that PDU claimed. So moving right along, let's talk about what this ITIL practitioner stuff is, and we'll start with a picture of the book and what that looks like. So this is the front cover of the actual publication. It is the newest publication from Axelos, and it's hot off the presses. It was published earlier this year, and it's 143 pages. Why do I know that? Because I read all of them earlier this year. And so we'll talk through what's in the book. The idea is that this is a complement to the 5 core ITIL books that already exist. So for any of you guys that have taken a foundations class, you know that there are 5 books, one for strategy, another one for design of services, another one for how we transition those services into production. Service operation deals with all this stuff that's live and how we keep services up and running and what we do when things fail. And then there's a 5th core book called Continual Service Improvement, which this book actually pulls some of the concepts from CSI and talks through, but it's really meant to be a companion to the 5 core ITIL books that you learn as part of ITIL Foundations and Intermediate and Advanced training. So yeah, it's about 80 bucks if you were to buy it on the Axelos site. It is 60 pounds, and that translates to about $80 US, and you can buy it at the official ITIL site, which is itil-officialsite.com, and you can also get it off of Amazon. And we actually include a copy of this book as part of our ITIL Practitioner certification course. So this is what the book covers. There are 7 chapters, and we'll dig into some of them. I think some of them are much more valuable than some of the others. Here's basically a rundown of that table of contents. So I'll go step by step and talk through what's in each of the chapters just a bit. Chapter 1 is about how you use the concepts of IT service management. So they talk about understanding what a service is. So some of this is, you know, if you've taken, again, like I said, a foundations course, it's going to be a review of just some of the initial foundational concepts that you learned as part of that course, but it's a really good refresher. What a service is, how to deliver services, the difference between ITIL and IT service management, things like that. Chapter 2 is where it gets really good, where they talk about the guiding principles. That's my favorite chapter, and we're going to dig into exactly what's in there because that was awesome. In fact, I think that's the chapter worth reading in the book. The rest of it, a little less of my favorite part. Chapter 3 gets into the CSI approach. So again, this is something that you would cover as part of a foundations class. You would also cover it as part of a intermediate continual service improvement course. But it walks through the 6-step continual service improvement process. So things that you would do and produce each step. So it kind of breaks apart each of the process steps a little bit more than you would get in like a foundations class. And then chapter 4 talks about metrics and measurements, what critical success factors are, KPIs are, how to categorize metrics and think about metrics and how to have a good balance there, tips around doing assessments and reporting. Honestly, I wish there were more examples of actual like companies and how they've used IT service management concepts and changed. It's kind of a shame that there aren't more stories within the text, because one of the things that they actually recommend that you do is a lot more storytelling. And I'm like, well, where are the stories in this book? So yeah, that's something that hopefully they'll improve in one of the later versions of the book. But chapter 4, yeah, talks about, okay, how do you measure this stuff? How do you make sure that you're making progress? Chapter 5 is all around communications. If you have gone through and gotten your PMP certification, this is a review of a lot of the stuff that's in the in communications management and stakeholder management from PMI's PMBOK guide, or project management body of knowledge guide. So they pull a lot of project management concepts into this book. I don't know if that's it's not really the de facto standard for project management. I would stick with the project management body of guide, but it gives you some ideas on things to be thinking about as you're communicating, some principles and techniques and things like that. Chapter 6 walks through organizational change management. It's meant to give you ideas on how to help folks transition through change, some of the key activities. Again, I wish this chapter was stronger. We'll talk more about Kotter's 8 steps a little bit later on in this webinar. But yeah, it has some things around how do you help organizations change, because anytime you try to implement IT service management, you're changing the behavior of people and teams and the whole organization and how it works. So there's going to be people issues along the way, and so the idea here is to give you some tools to help you address the people side of it. And then chapter 7 goes through the toolkit. It's sort of like, if you guys are familiar, if you've heard this acronym called PRINCE2, the same people that have come out with the ITIL books also have a methodology for project management called PRINCE2. It's really big in countries outside of the US. One of the things that I really like about the PRINCE2 book is at the end of the book, they give you lots of project management templates. So all the deliverables that they talk about in the book, they actually give you examples, which I wish the project management body of knowledge had in it, because that's invariably always something project managers find useful is, okay, can I have a template to do this so that I don't have to recreate the wheel? It's modeled off of that, but the stuff in the toolkit, I think it's way overkill, especially if you're trying to do more of an Agile Scrum kind of project or an approach to service management. So there are some ideas there, but could be stronger. So a couple of things that I thought were really interesting and just great reminders in chapter 1. The first being this quote that says, "Making it easy for the customer is the mission of the service provider." I think that's such a good philosophy, because a lot of times IT, whether we realize it or not, we make the assumption that we think we know what customers want, or we try to get them to understand our own terminology, like what is an incident, what is a request, what is a problem. They don't have to know any of that stuff. It really is our job to make it easy for the customer and try to understand them rather than trying to get them to understand us. And then the second thing I think is really, really good is that good process includes only those controls that are absolutely necessary for the consistent achievement of the desired results. And why I think this is important is because there's a common misconception, I hear this every day, is that the stuff in the ITIL books is too bureaucratic, to the point that sometimes ITIL can be a 4-letter word in organizations because they think it's going to put so much rigor and control in all this stuff. And ITIL can be lightweight. It should be lightweight in order for an organization to work, I think, and to work well. I think we go way too heavy sometimes on some of these processes and bring things to a crawl, and then we get upset because we've now made a very bureaucratic process that otherwise should not be. So ITIL can be lightweight. All right, chapter 2, this is my favorite stuff. So the 9 guiding principles. I'm going to walk through each of these because I think they're really, really valuable. And again, I think this is the best part of the book. It's only about maybe 10 to 20 pages. If you buy the book, I would recommend reading this, pulling what you can out of this, and then if you get tired and the rest of the book makes you sleepy, then take a nap and don't worry about continuing on to the other chapters. But here are the 9 guiding principles. So the first thing, and not in any particular order, but the first one that they list in the book is to focus on value. Everything that we do as a service provider needs to map directly or indirectly to value for the customer or our organization. So some things that I think, at least in my own consulting work that I've done, is make sure that I'm asking the question why. Well, we need this process, or we need this service. Okay, well, why? What's the purpose? How does this move the organization forward? Why are we doing IT service management in the first place? When I see organizations use the concepts in the ITIL book as a tool to address a pain point or to achieve a goal, that's where you're going to get real value. And when you focus on what your customers want, that's where you're going to have value. Not because, well, we have to check all the boxes, or we want to become compliant with what the ITIL books say. That's not where you should focus. Don't look at these concepts as the goal. Look at them as a tool to get you to where you're trying to go. That second one, if you're going across the page, design for experience, that one speaks to the customer experience and how we need to actively manage it. So they mention in the book that you want to start with where the most visible pain is for a customer. Look at what they're experiencing. It's not so much like user experience, but more design for the customer experience, and make it easy for them. The third one, if you're going across the top row, start with where you are. Resist the temptation to start from scratch and to try to build something new without considering what's already available to be leveraged. A lot of times you'll find that there's pockets of excellence, and you want to keep that and use that and build on that rather than to say, everything we're doing is wrong, let's start from the beginning. You're going to create a lot more work and frustrate folks unnecessarily. So make sure that you're leveraging what's there. And yeah, it's about the journey. Start with where you are and just get better. All right, the fourth one, this is the fourth one, work holistically. Yeah, so don't work in a vacuum. Think about the bigger picture, because when you change one thing, it's going to have an impact on other things. So if you strengthen one process, that's going to have an impact and help you strengthen other things. Progressive iteratively, this really speaks to having more of an agile mindset and making sure that you have short, small chunks of work. What you're not trying to do is have a huge program and everyone goes away into a black hole for 6 months and then says, ta-da, here's all the processes. But you want this to be an iterative progression. You want to include your stakeholders and show progress in short bursts of time, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever that may be, and show value very, very quickly. Otherwise, what will happen is your stakeholders, at the very beginning, they'll be very excited, and then what typically ends up happening with big IT service management implementations, if you're not progressing iteratively and showing work often, is then people lose interest, and then they move on to the next bright, shiny object. So make sure that you are constantly showing your work, getting feedback, adapting, inspecting and adapting. The next one is observe directly. To know what's really going on, you want to measure and observe it directly. So don't just take people's word for it, but go and look at data, ask good questions, question the data that you're seeing. So don't just read a process document and say, oh, okay, everybody must be working perfectly. Ask people how they're doing things and watch them work and see if they're actually following the process that they have written down. Sometimes that's the case. More often than that, that's not the case. So make sure that you're observing directly. Be transparent is the next one. Make things as transparent as possible. People want to be made aware of what is happening, how is this happening, why is this happening, and be sure to go back and tie that back to your overarching vision. Ensure that accomplishments are communicated and celebrated. We do not do this enough. So make sure that you're doing that. What else? This can make or break an improvement effort, so be sure to take the time to over-communicate. Tell a story. Explain your what, who, where, when, and most importantly, your why behind all of this. Not just, we're trying to implement a change management process, but what is it that we're trying to fix? What are we trying to gain out of it? What successes have we had so far? Even if they're anecdotal, that's really helpful to just kind of paint a picture for folks and bring that transparency. You can never be too transparent. So I think oftentimes we assume other people know what's going on, but we don't tell them enough. Collaborate. Again, make sure that you are bringing in enough people and that you're giving them that sense of transparency and giving them the information that they need. And different groups are going to need different levels of information. Yeah, and then the last thing is keep it simple. If you've got a process, service, an action, a metric, whatever it is, and it doesn't provide value or it doesn't produce a useful outcome, eliminate it. In a process or procedure, use the minimum number of steps needed to accomplish an objective. Do not worry or do not try to do it all. It's a lot easier to add to something later, and your processes will mature over time, but start really small and keep it super simple, at least at the beginning. I heard a great piece of advice many years ago, especially when you're talking about processes. Make it very easy for folks to follow a process, very difficult for them to not, or for them to go around it. All right, so moving right along to Chapter 3, this is a picture of the Continual Service Improvement Model. If you've taken a foundations class, this should be familiar to you. If you've taken a CSI intermediate class, this should be really familiar to you. But it's worth noting here again because it's a really good approach on how you implement ITIL concepts. The 6 questions that you see kind of to the middle and to the left, those are the 6 steps. So you have to answer each question before moving on, and the stuff on the right helps you answer each of the questions kind of in that middle area. So good project managers do this in their projects. If you're trying to roll out something new within IT service management, treat it like a project. And these are good questions to make sure that you walk through. So keep it simple. And if you think about any, let's say New Year's resolution, we're coming up to a time of year where we're all starting to maybe think about New Year's resolutions. If you think about a New Year's resolution and any resolution that has failed, it's probably because we did not go through these questions and fully answer each of them. Usually it's because we stop at the step. It could be, I want to finally get in shape this year. Okay, well, that's my vision. Okay, well, where am I now? I am not fit at all. Okay, well, where do I want to be and how do I get there? What's my plan? Am I measuring myself so that I can see daily, weekly, monthly progress? Have I set good milestones in place so I can make sure and confirm that I actually achieved what I set out to do? And then the last question, I think in our own personal lives as well as in organizations, we don't ask enough is how do we, once we've invested this time, effort, energy to accomplish our goals, how do we keep that momentum going? How do we keep maturing as an organization with our processes, our services, and what we're delivering to our customers? So this also comes out of the Chapter 3 book, and I think this is a nice reminder in terms of where to start your improvement efforts. It kind of looks like it's actually on page 37 of the ITIL Practitioner publication. What it's showing is if you've got a big kind of program around what you want to improve, break it into chunks, and those chunks can be quarterly chunks. That's what they're showing here in this example. So Q1, let's say we've made the decision we are finally going to be serious about implementing IT service management concepts, and we're going to solve some of these nagging problems that we've been dealing with. Okay, so in Q1 of 2017, take on something that's really easy and maybe is low impact so you can get some success under your belt first. And then in Q2, let's stay with some more of the easy stuff, but then let's bring it so that it's higher. It has a higher level of impact and maybe is customer facing or impacts more teams. And then Q3, we move into more of the difficult stuff, but also again, set ourselves up for success, have stuff that's low impact, and then Q4, we get into the stuff that's really difficult. Once we've got our process in place and we've got a good way of working, then let's tackle some of the really high impact things. So it's just one approach. If you're doing things like scaled agile, you work on the shortest job with the highest value first. So there's all different kinds of approaches. This is just one of them here. But I thought it was good in the one sense of just showing that if you try to do too many things all at once, and I've seen this happen, you will fail at all of them. So just take a few things, maybe 2 or 3 areas that you want to improve at the most, or 2 or 3 projects that you want to tackle, and then work on them each quarter. When you think about the fact that you're changing the way your organization works, your organization can only take on so much change at once, and then what happens is they get saturated with change and kind of start throwing it all out the window or going back to the way things used to work. So you want to set yourself as well as others up for success when you start to roll out improvements. This next slide talks about critical success factors, key performance indicators, and then there's this weird little thing called a watermelon metric that they talk about in the practitioner book. I've never seen it anywhere else, but it just kind of is like a surprise watermelons in the middle. Critical success factors are something that needs to happen if your process, your project, your plan, your service, whatever that may be, is going to succeed. So that's the goal. So maybe your critical success factor is we want to increase customer satisfaction. We're dealing, we've had some high visibility failures, and we want to bring back customer satisfaction and confidence in IT. KPIs are what we measure to show that we've achieved each of those critical success factors. So it goes on to define on your slide, key performance indicator is the metric that is used to help manage that process, service, activity, project, whatever that may be. You can measure a lot of metrics. The most important ones you define as your key performance indicators, and they help make sure that you're on track. So if your critical success factor is, hey, we want to increase customer satisfaction, increase customer confidence, then maybe some of the KPIs are, well, let's start meeting our SLAs a higher percentage of the time, or let's increase availability of X key services, or let's look at our customer satisfaction scores and see how those are improving over time. And then a watermelon metric, I've heard something similar to this, but what a watermelon metric, when you hear that term, it means that something looks really good and green on the outside, but when you start digging in, kind of peeling back the onion, inside it's all broken and red. So I've heard the saying that I've heard that I actually like a bit better is that when you see red, yellow, green, executives really like to see red, yellow, green because it's something they can look at quickly and digest. But a lot of times you have to dig in deeper to what those colors are telling you. So the saying I like is that you question the green and you support the red. Because the red is really where you need support. It's not just, oh, green is good and red is bad. You really want to make sure that they're telling you the right information, those colors, and that you understand what's behind them. All right, so Chapter 4 digs into metrics. This, again, is something that is covered at at a higher level as part of a foundations class, but this shows the reasons why you measure. You shouldn't measure just because you can measure, and there's some really great IT service management platforms out there. We implement one of them that I think is great. It comes with a lot of reports out of the box, and sometimes people get really excited and they say, oh my gosh, I want all these 150 reports, without really understanding the why first. So the better way to think about metrics is start with a decision that you're trying to make first, and then go out and figure out, okay, what do we have to measure? Metrics and measurements should help us do one or more of these things. They should help us justify, make a justification, or show factual evidence like, hey, we need to hire more people, and here's why we need to do that. Or to validate that we are headed towards or in alignment with our strategic vision, to intervene when things get off track, or to start to guide us toward those targets or those metrics that we have in place. And if it doesn't do one of these things, you're wasting your time collecting metrics. You want to make sure that you're thoughtful about how you do that. Chapter 7 talks about some CSI, or continual service improvement concepts. This tool is super simple, and I love it so much. Whenever we start working with customers on improving and doing strategic planning and things like that, I usually will bring up a CSI register, and we'll just start collecting, okay, what are the things that you need to improve? And so what this does is it can be something simple like an Excel spreadsheet, but basically just captures all those areas where you're having pain or you're trying to achieve something, and identifies areas where you need to improve. And then what it allows your CSI manager to do is then put some more details behind it. So maybe you have 100 great ideas, and then you start dissecting them and saying, okay, is this a small project? Is this some low-hanging fruit, or is this something very large maybe we have to get approval for? How does this fit in our priorities, or what's the sense of urgency behind this one? Who's going to own each of these ideas, which could eventually turn into projects or even programs? What's the status on them? What's the cost behind them? What's the benefit that we get out of these things? But it's just a very simple list that just helps you manage your improvement ideas and can be really helpful as you work towards improving your organization. Okay, so that is a high level overview of what's in the book. Let's talk about the exam itself. So practitioner actually comes after you take a foundations class. So you would take a 3-day foundations class, and then you would follow it up with a 2-day practitioner course, and at the end of that 2-day course you have an examination and you become certified. So the exam is 40 questions, just like the foundations exam, but they're a bit more in-depth. There are scenario-based questions, so they give you I think it's 5 or 6 different case studies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, 5 different small case studies. They're each about maybe a paragraph or 2, and then they have specific questions that relate back to each of the case studies. So they break up the questions. So questions 1 through 6, for example, go with case study 1, and then you've got 7 through 12 go through, and they give you additional information. So there's a lot more reading that's involved than in a foundations class. Foundations class, you have 40 questions, multiple choice, they're pretty straightforward. Here, you've got scenarios, and you've got to take the concepts from the practitioner book and apply them to these fictitious case studies. So it's a little bit more of a challenging exam. Now, it is open book, but they don't give you a whole lot of time to go and look up answers, so you need to really know the material. And in fact, I actually find the book a little bit distracting as you're taking the exam, but it's helpful if you get really stuck and you want to look something up quickly, but you need to know where that information is in the book because you just don't have a ton of time to be going back and casually reading each of the chapters. No, you need to know exactly where that information resides. So of the 40 questions, you need to get 28 of them correct to pass, or 70%. I will be honest with you guys, this is a difficult exam, and I've known folks that are ITIL expert certified that have taken a lot of the intermediate and advanced courses and have not passed this exam. So yeah, just be aware of that. With our courses, we do have an exam pass guarantee, so the difficulty of this exam should not stress you out. We do pay for exam retakes. The other problem that I have with the exam is a bit around the way it was designed because it doesn't really align with the book. I'm hoping that over the next few months they've made an improvement here within the last month or so, but I really think at some point they need to go back and revisit the exam. So yeah, the two are not a very good pairing between the book and the exam. Some of this stuff you just have to use your best judgment and try to use process of elimination to come up with the best answer. Okay, so I wanted to share with you guys just some pro tips. You know, even with a 2-day practitioner class, it's really hard to explain to folks how you implement IT service management projects, because I've been doing this my entire career and I'm still learning how to do this. So these are just some of the things that I've found in my own consulting expertise that I found to be very, very helpful, and I have the scars on the inside to prove it. I have some scars on the outside, but that's because I don't pay attention where I walk and I fall down a lot. But these are just some of the pro tips that I would say are super helpful with anyone that you're looking to help you implement IT service management. So if you're looking at outside consulting firms, this is what the really good consultants do, is they solve the problem and they do it quickly. And I've got a LinkedIn article that we'll send you guys a link to that goes into all of this stuff from today's webinar, but then also goes through some of these tips and tricks. So you guys have this as follow-up reading at your leisure after this webinar. But at the end of the day, like I said before, IT service management concepts are just a tool. They should not be the end-all and be-all. And so really good project managers, really good IT service management consultants will help you solve your problem. They'll help you elicit what that problem is or what those challenges are that you're facing. They'll focus on that and they'll start with that problem and work to resolve it. Not so great project managers and IT service management consultants will focus more on the mechanics of implementing a process, and can quote theory all day long, but can't help you solve the problems that you're trying to get rid of. And you don't have weeks and months to solve this problem. Sometimes you have hours and days and things like that. The patient is bleeding, and we're talking about, you know, what the patient looks like instead of actually solving the issue that's going on. The second thing is, I would say, stop calling it ITIL all the time. I see this happen in a number of organizations where people just get really sick of hearing this acronym ITIL. They get worn down, or they've seen it not be successful in the past, so they get a really bad taste in their mouth. And when you start saying ITIL, they just kind of glaze over. In fact, one of our other senior advisors was telling me a funny story the other day. Amanda, if any of you guys have worked with her, she said she worked on a big project many years ago, and whenever she said the word ITIL, the sponsor, or the first time she said the acronym ITIL, the sponsor stopped her and was like, no, you know what, we tried that, doesn't work, don't want to do it. And she's like, okay, that's fine. And then she came back a few days later and was like, I have this really good idea on how we can improve this process and just do continual improvement. And when she told them what the ideas were, they were like, oh my God, you're a genius. That's amazing. I love it. Do it. So I call it kind of hiding the peas in the potatoes. It's not important what you call it. Don't let it be a stumbling block to what you're trying to do. There's real value in a lot of the stuff that's in the ITIL books, but you don't have to call it that. Call it, you know, continual improvement, or best practice, or hey, here's a great idea I have. Let's try this. Let's experiment. I think this will help us in what we're trying to do. You know, but think critically, use common sense, and avoid the acronym as needed. The third thing is, don't try to do everything all at once. I had one customer many moons ago that tried to implement all 26 processes at once and didn't really get any of them implemented well at all. I would say break your processes up to maybe 1 or 2, or not even processes, but what are the 2 or 3 projects, the 2 or 3 challenges you want to solve, and let's focus on just a few things each phase. So when you do it in a phased approach, you give yourself the ability to get better over time and not overwhelm folks and overwhelm your team. Don't try to boil the ocean. You'll have a much better time with it if you do it in a phased approach. Again, remember, it's a journey. Okay, so here's some of the upcoming events. I know I mentioned ITIL Foundations a few times. If you guys are interested in taking a practitioner course, you do have to take Foundations first. We have one coming up December 5th through 7th in Fairfax, Virginia, and also one December 12th through 14th. I hear the weather's amazing right now in San Diego. It's amazing all the time in San Diego. But we have those two Foundations courses if you're looking to get certified by the end of the year. And then once you have Foundations, we have a practitioner coming up December 12th and 13th. That's a Monday, Tuesday in our downtown DC office. And like I said before, with all of our certification courses, we have an exam pass guarantee. So you pay one price, and if you don't pass the exam, then we give you some review exercises and make sure that you're prepped and ready to take it again, and we actually eat the cost of any and all retakes. All right, so let's open it up to any questions that you guys may have. And if you don't think of any questions right now as we're going through them, feel free to reach out to us on social media. On Twitter, we're just at Beyond20. And YouTube, we've got, if you guys haven't checked out our YouTube channel, it is awesome. If you search Beyond20 LLC, we have more than 200 videos on YouTube. A number of them are around IT service management tools. I think we're about at 150 or so. But then there's a lot under just project management. We've got ones on Agile and Scrum and DevOps and Agile service management. Ones that are longer in length, about 40, 45 minutes to an hour. Those will actually also give you one free PDU, and we can send you details on how to claim that PDU as well. But lots and lots of good resources there. If you have not subscribed to that channel, I highly recommend that you do so. We're also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and we'll send you a link to the LinkedIn article that talks through all the stuff we talked about today.
Okay, so we've got two questions that have come in. One of them we got last time we did this webinar, so I'll start with that one. Is it worth getting certified, or should I just read the book?
So that is a great question. I would say if you read chapter 2 of the book, that's super helpful, but the book won't teach you like going to a class will. So I'll talk about the class a little bit. I don't think I had a slide really on that. So our classes tend to be very interactive, and practitioner is no exception. In fact, it's a lot more interactive than the foundations class, because the goal of practitioner is to help you actually implement some of this stuff. And the reason why Axelos created the ITIL Practitioner book in the first place is because it really filled a need that people have voiced, or a challenge people that have voiced for many years. Because what happens is in a foundations class, you're just learning all the terminology, you have a lot of words being thrown at you, and you're just trying to understand what it all means and how it all fits together. And then to try to also say, okay, now let's talk about how you implement this stuff. It's just very overwhelming. And so practitioner is meant to say, okay, now that you've got all the terminology in your head and you understand what it all means, then let's take 2 days to really talk through how you go forth and implement this in your own organization. So it's really a nice complement to what you're doing in foundations. And so what we do, and I can't speak to what other training organizations do, or how they teach this course, but ours is full of hands-on exercises. So we'll talk a bit about a concept. So we'll take, like, for example, one of the 9 guiding principles, and we'll say, okay, I'm just going to choose one at random. Okay, let's progress iteratively. Okay, so then we'll take some example, we'll take some exercises, and we'll say, or some what do you call it, almost like a mini case study, and we'll say, okay, let's talk about how we would actually do this in an organization. How would we progress iteratively? How would we focus on value in this situation? How would we be transparent? What are some of the things that we would do? So we have exercises that really drive home each of these things. We also give a lot of templates, so you come back to work equipped with tools and techniques and some really good principles about how to get started. The other thing that we do that's a little bit different is all of our instructors, when they're not in the classroom, they're actually out implementing this stuff. So your instructors will have a wealth of experience on doing everything from an assessment to building processes to coming up with RACI models and defining roles and responsibilities and using service management and Agile environment. So you've got basically a consultant to work with for 2 days to really understand how you can start to solve some problems in your own organization. So It's really a hands-on, collaborative, I think, a really fun class. Yeah, so I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, reading the book is like 2 out of 10, and taking a class is like 10 out of 10. It's super fun. And then taking the exam is like back to a 1 out of 10. But then once you pass it, then you're done.
Cool. We have another question here. Which intermediate class would you recommend taking after taking practitioner?
Ooh, okay. So my personal favorites for the intermediate classes, I really like continual service improvement. That is a 3-day course. It talks a lot about the tools that you use, so like assessments and metrics and measurements and reporting. It talks about Cotter's 8 steps, which I also just now am realizing I did not have a slide on, but I have a link to it in the LinkedIn article that I wrote, which I think is definitely worth checking out. So if you go to Cotter International, their website, I like how they describe the 8 steps, but they talk about establishing a sense of urgency, building a guiding coalition, forming a strategic vision and initiatives, enlisting a volunteer army, and then enabling action by removing barriers, generating short-term wins, sustaining that acceleration that you have, and instituting change. And basically where Cotter came up with these 8 steps is he studied organizations where they tried to change how they worked. And sometimes they were successful, but many more times they were unsuccessful. And so he looked at the ones that were successful and he said, what do they all have in common? What did they do right? And how do you replicate that? And that's where those 8 steps come into play. And I see this play out many times, that when change fails in an organization, you can usually look back to one of these 8 steps and say, what did they forget to do? Or what did they not do a very good job of doing? And you can tackle the problem that way. And ideally, you avoid the problem in the first place by following each of these 8 steps and making sure you have a really good handle on them. So to go back to the question, what do I recommend as far as ITIL intermediate classes? I think CSI is very worthwhile, but there's a lot of overlap between the CSI course and the practitioner course. I would also say that if you are a project manager, service offerings and agreements is outstanding. If you're in charge of building a catalog or helping design service level agreements or maintaining a portfolio, making strategic decisions, service offerings and agreements, or SOA, that's a 4-day intermediate class, is great. I personally like the capability courses, so there's one called SOA, like I just mentioned. There's one called OSA, Operational Support and Analysis, that walks through things like how do you manage incidents, how do you do root cause analysis and problem management, so how do you keep things up and running? That one's excellent. And I think RCV is also a really good class. That stands for Release Control Validation. So if you're at all involved in like configuration management, asset management, change management, release and deployment, or even knowledge management, knowledge sharing, that's a really, really good hands-on course. So yeah, so that's some ideas.
Okay, last question. Who in an organization should take the practitioner class? I'm assuming they're referring to maybe what level of management or what role.
Okay. I think project managers, this is an ideal class for a project manager because really is a good refresher of what project management skills you need to bring to IT service management, but then it also teaches you a bit more about IT service management, things to be considering. So project managers absolutely need to attend this. You also get 16 PDUs for attending this class. Totally also forgot to mention that earlier. So that's really helpful. I would say if you own any process, if you are responsible for maintaining a process, like if you're a change manager or an incident manager, it can be really helpful to you. I mean, personally, I think anybody in IT is going to benefit from it, but if you're like part of a team that is trying to roll IT service management concepts out to your organization, if you're part of like a service management office, if you guys are familiar with the term PMO, it's similar to a PMO, but it's a service management office or an SMO, or if you're part of like a IT service management steering committee or planning committee, this will be wildly beneficial for you.
That's all I've got. Are you feeling good? Feeling like you got it all out there?
I'm feeling great, yeah. I don't know if I got it all out there, but I got a good bit of it out there. Yeah. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're super friendly. except Lindsay. She has moods.
It's true. I'm a complicated woman. Okay, on that note, enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. Look for an email from me with the video from the session today, the slides, and we'll send you some links to a few of the articles Erika mentioned during the presentation. Thanks so much. Have a lovely, what is it, Tuesday? Have a lovely Tuesday. Bye-bye.